So if you want to bring up the screens that give them a little bit of guidance on how to participate, thank you, Bryn.
Great. So like we said, we're using GoToTraining. We have you all muted by the organizer just to prevent any awkward background noises, so you don't have to stress out in case a kid or a pet or your partner walks in. And so just for your own sake and ours with the background noises, but we still want to keep you engaged. So as you can see here, the audio functions, you can use phone, you can call in via the phone or use your computer audio to be able to hear us. We also have the chat box. So if at any time you have any issues, you can't see, you need to go back a slide, or if you have any questions or comments, please feel free to chat them to us. You'll also see the materials tab. So our presenter Barbara today included some great resources for you all, and those are available for download right now under the materials tab. You'll also see circled, there's a little hand for the hand raise function. At certain times, we will have question and answer periods, or we would want to hear some of your feedback. And if you are able to and would like to, you can raise your hand and I can unmute you. I or my teammate Madison will unmute you and ask. We'll call out your name, let you know that you've been unmuted by us. And you can ask and we'll be able to hear your voice, because it is so important to not just be on a screen all the time. And if it's green, that means we'll be able to hear you. We have you manually muted, but you might have also self-muted. So if you do choose to speak up and have us hear your voice, make sure that you have your self-mute off as well. But we'll remind you of that when the time comes. Awesome. So you can follow Strategies 2.0 on our website, strategyca.org. We have a Facebook page, a LinkedIn, and you can catch recordings of our convenings on our YouTube channel, which is Strategies 2.0. So if this is your first Northern Learning Community and you're just tuning in for the first time, this is part of a series. It's not required that you attended the earlier convenings, but if afterwards you're thinking, wow, that was such a great conversation, I wonder if I can learn more, you can. We have recordings of all of the previous convenings up on our YouTube channel now. So I highly recommend checking that out. It's a great way to learn more about the family strengthening field, and we have a variety of amazing topics and speakers. Okay, and now we're going to go into some polls to just find out who we have in the audience. Since we can't be there face to face, we would love to hear from you online. And I know GoToTraining is not a perfect system, so you might not be able to take the poll on the poll function. And if that's the case, please write in your answer from the chat. So what type of organization are you from? A community-based nonprofit? Do you work for the county or local government or state government? Child abuse prevention, early childhood education, maybe medical or public health, or somewhere else. And if that's the case, then I want to hear from you. Let's write it into the chat. And it looks like we have about 50% of people who have responded so far. So we'll give it a couple more seconds, maybe 15 to 20 more seconds. Okay, we've got a little less than 70% of people voting. So we'll give it 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. And we're going to close the poll now. So Madison, do you mind sharing the results with us? Awesome. So it looks like we've got 59% or so of you all come from a community-based or nonprofit, 15% government or county-based, 7% of you all in child abuse prevention, 12% with early childhood education or intervention, and 7% with medical/county public health. Now, Madison, I'm not able to see the chat. Did we have anyone write in where they're from that's other than the ones listed?
No, I think pretty much what was listed is what people are from.
Awesome, thank you all. So next we have another question. What's your role in your organization? Frontline staff? Are you a supervisor, program manager, administrative, or are you a parent or community member, volunteer? So I'm excited. Oh, we've already got people voting. That's great. Okay, we've got a little over 50% voting, so let's get those in. Let's get as many people as possible. Again, if you are not able to launch the poll, it does depend on what browser you're using, and GoTo did not give us a best practices guide, so apologies for that, but please, please write in. We love to hear from you all. Okay, so we're gonna give it 15 more seconds. We'll give it 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. So we're gonna close the poll now and share the results. Awesome. For those of you who might not be able to see it, about 63% of people are frontline staff, 8% are in a supervisory role, 21% are program managers, 3% in administrative roles, and about 5% of you all are parents, community members, or volunteers. We're so glad to have you all.
Yes, thank you very much. Thank you, Bryn, for doing that poll. And as many of you know who have been working with learning communities in the past, generally we go to our different sites and we have a hub and we do introductions that way, and we learn who's in our various hubs and remote locations that way. But this is the way we're doing it today, and we're learning about who's out there and joining us, and it looks like we have a really nice mix of people. And again, just welcome for being with us. And we have another poll here, and Bryn will take us through that.
Yeah, so our next poll, we kind of see just how you're doing today. So we're calling this our weather report, and we're using this metaphor to kind of check in on how everyone's doing. I know this is a really difficult time and very stressful, so for a lot of people, but you know, some of us are thriving through it. So we're using our weather report. So are you feeling sunny? You're feeling good? Finding ways to balance your work and personal life? Are you feeling partly cloudy, going in and out of feeling good? Struggling at times with anxiety, but you're still able to focus on your work at home and you've really developed some of those coping strategies? Are you feeling windy with periods of rain, mostly stressed, feeling hard to find sort of those moments of peace and having to work hard to find balance and coping strategies? Or are you feeling like thunderstorms with lightning, just constantly stressed or anxious and isolated, and work and home are both really challenging? So Madison, if you can launch that poll for us to see how you're feeling. I know I personally, today I'm feeling pretty sunny, but in general, I've been feeling partly cloudy throughout this whole stay-at-home order. Um, mhm. Okay, we've got about 60% of people who voted, so we'll give it 10 more seconds. We'll give it 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. Okay, let's share the results. It looks like about a third of you are feeling sunny. That's great. We're glad that hopefully we can add a little more sunshine to your day. 55% of you are like me and feeling partly cloudy. 13% are saying windy with periods of rain. And none of you are saying thunderstorms with lightning, which I'm grateful for. I'm glad you all are feeling better than that. Alrighty, thank you all for sharing with us. And if you have another weather metaphor for how you're feeling, we'd be happy to read those in the chat as well. Okay, on to you, Susan.
Thank you, Bryn. We're really just wanting to set the stage with an acknowledgement here of where we are. We did the weather metaphor barometer, so to speak, to acknowledge that we're in some pretty unprecedented times, unusual at the very least, and people are coping with it in different ways. So we just wanted to put this screen up to realize that we're in this COVID-19 phenomenon. It's unlike what most of us have ever experienced in the past, and we're holding a multitude of feelings through it, responsibilities, fears, joys, all of these at the same time. And we're acknowledging that there are many responses to stress and uncertainty, but each of them is valid, even though it's a broad continuum of different ways that we're responding to this. And as we're pointing out in the brief little poll here, sometimes people are sunny, sometimes people are cloudy. So we're moving in and out of these things as we're going through this experience together. We acknowledge that there's no better opportunity to practice compassion and collective care than right now. This is the work. It's the work that we actually do, all of you, every day, bringing this compassion and collective care into our work with the people that we're serving. And also to acknowledge the critical need for reflection, inquiry, and prioritization of the most critical needs. So we felt like we would really not be speaking to what's right out in front of us if we just jumped into the learning community and didn't take a little bit of time to ground ourselves in the context that we are in right now, and that we're all doing things a little bit differently than what we typically do, some very differently than what we typically do, and we're making adjustments to cope and go along with it. So we just appreciate your honesty and giving us a sense of where you are in the weather today. And fortunately, it is a sunny day. And so we have some sunny weather outside. And as many of you said when we were coming together, you're enjoying being able to get out a little bit, get out in nature, enjoying the sunshine, just being able to take a walk and do some of those things that lift our spirits. So let's go to the next slide. So we are in part 4 today. We have had a 4-part series with Barbara Ivins being our presenter, and we've been so grateful for the wisdom and the perspective and the expertise and vast experience that she's brought into this series. And as Bryn mentioned earlier, it's not essential that a person have participated in all 3 parts of the previous series until now. Each one of the series is related to each other, but they also stand alone in the value of the information that's being presented. And part 4 today is promoting resilience by applying early childhood mental health perspective in all systems of care for young children. Next slide. So I wanted to just take us back to our last session and the discussion we had about the word cloud. And I'm not going to take a lot of time on this. I'm trying to kind of go through this as quickly as possible to give Barbara as much time for her to be able to bring all of her points together and to really wrap up this 4-part session. But one important thing that we've done together that has provided continuity from one session to the next is our work on this word cloud. It started in session 1 and we're wrapping it up today in session 4. So in session 3, we had a discussion. We took a look at the word cloud that had been developed. In session 1, we started to formulate that word cloud, and we're just putting words out there in terms of how we would describe our approach to working with children and families in this family support arena. And so a lot of words were generated. In session 2, we started to pare those words down a little bit, and we were thinking about really our words in general and the significance of our words. Not only the words that we use in how we're working with families and in the narrative that we're working on with them in terms of how they're looking at their experiences, how they're making meaning from their experiences, the perspective that they're taking as they're working through the things that we're addressing with them. But there's also value to our own internal narrative, and that, in fact, the internal things that we say to ourselves may be our greatest resource. And we had a really rich conversation about that in session 2, and talking about the fact that, we need to be mindful of our words. And so last session, we had a long list of words that we had been formulating into this word cloud. And we tried to streamline that down to our top 12 words. And these are the words that came out of that session. Relationship-based. Remember, this is our approach to our work with children and families, family support with children and families. Relationship-based, cultural humility, parents as partners, family empowerment, safe, non-judgmental, equity, trust, resilience, collaborative, compassion, encouragement. And I'm not going to keep on belaboring this, but when we're thinking to ourselves and we're having this internal narrative, the relationship we have with ourselves, so to speak, these same words would apply. Practicing self-compassion, having encouraging words, those types of things. Are our words, is our internal narrative empowering? So we can't perhaps apply it word by word, but you get the point. And we also took a look last time at a different format. What if we were going to put these this word cloud onto something, what kind of format would we like? So we had 2 different examples last time. One was a kind of more linear and square format that we would put these words into, and the other was a circular format. And it turned out that the preferred format was the circular format. And then we talked about some kind of swag that we could put these words onto that would keep those words alive, that this is part of common language that we're developing across our region when it comes to family support. And so, there were different options that we looked at in terms of what that swag would be. There was an opportunity for people to write in something that they would like, in terms of the swag. And it turned out that the shopping bag was the thing that percolated up to the top. That was the preferred swag. And so we took that very seriously, and we have put the word cloud onto a shopping bag. So if we want to go to the next slide. Where you can pick up your bag. So I sent these out in the mail to our locations where we've been having remote sites and hubs over the course of our time together during this series. And we wanted to make those reusable bags. They came out quite nicely. I think you'll like them. So we've sent them to Sharon, who has been our facilitator in Ukiah. We sent them to Dora, who's been our facilitator in Eureka. We sent them to Nicole, who's been our facilitator in Alturas, and to Anna, who's been our facilitator in Lakeport, Alicia in Redding, and Karen in Mount Shasta. And so when we're able to circulate a little bit more freely than we are now, and I think that's coming, you may go to these places and pick up your bag. And we also made a card. It's like a note card that you could put up on your wall or someplace that, you know, just is a little reminder that these are the words. And we just want to keep these words moving forward. This is the product of our time together. It's a tangible, concrete product that we can literally carry with us and that we can continue to promote in our work as we support children and families. And so just to kind of bring that to your awareness that these are where those bags are, and you can pick them up at those locations. Next slide. This is where we're going to turn the time over to Barbara. And thank you very much, Barbara, for taking the time to be with us through all 4 of these sessions and for doing a lot of the work on the word cloud in terms of getting all the colors right and getting it into that format. So we're just very appreciative that you're joining us again today for the wrap up. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks. So now Madison is going to switch presenters. Awesome. And we're going to be seeing Barbara's screen.
So can you see my screen? Yes, can you see my screen, Bryn? Can you see that?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
great. Great, thank you and welcome everybody. My name is Barbara Ivins. I'm really happy to be with you today. And thank you, Susan, for that introduction and Bryn for your support. As a disclaimer, I would like to ask everyone for their tolerance as I limp through my own technology issues and share my PowerPoint with you. So if we have any technical difficulties, my apologies in advance for that. But I have been really happy to be a part of Strategies 2.0 for this year. We made an intention a year ago to use the 4 sessions for the year to really devote to the topic of infant and early childhood mental health. And so today we are at session 4 and have been used to being in a hub and remote location format. And so today we are in webinar with you, and I have tried hard to make this engaging and visually interesting to you, knowing that we're all trying to engage to talk about relationships and be in this kind of video format is an interesting challenge, but one that I think we're going to manage well. So let me get to my first, there we go. So for those of you who have not been with us for the year, these were our training objectives for the year-long learning collaborative, thinking about young kids, and by infants and early childhood mental health, we think of children under 5. We wanted to create a common language and understanding of social emotional development and the importance of the early years as a foundation for development. When we talk about infants, we think very much about children under the age of 5. So when we think about infant mental health, we are thinking about the development, the social emotional development, and that sense of self and the lens that young children create, their lens of expectation and how they view the world. So that's what we're referring to. And the word cloud is a good example of our sharing a common language and common set of ideas about that. Secondly, which you will hear throughout this discussion today, is recognizing the centrality of relationships. That is going to be key in all aspects of thinking about young children. There was a very famous pediatrician, Donald Winnicott, who basically coined the phrase, "There is no such thing as a baby," meaning a baby never occurs outside of a context alone of a relationship, a caregiving environment. So that's very, very important. We spent a session applying a multiple lens framework for thinking about challenging behavior in young children and really setting out a way of thinking about when to be concerned about young children's behavior. That was particularly relevant because really the greatest number of expulsions in schools occurs in preschoolers throughout school-age children, and it's kind of alarming the extent to which children, because of behavior problems at a young age, get expelled from school. So we need a very complex way of thinking about how to understand behaviors and when to know about that. And finally, supporting social emotional well-being. And this intention has been about knowing when to screen and refer, and to really speak to everyone about seeing yourselves as part of the infant early childhood mental health, or what we're going to call the 0 to 5 workforce. So this was really as much an outreach year as anything, by saying across the counties that we were in, you are part of our workforce, and we want to make sure that you have the skills and understanding and support to work with the families that you need. So today we're going to hone in on 3 things. We're going to do a very quick summary of the principles and practices that we've been talking about all year. And then we're going to actually use the COVID-19 pandemic and the shelter-in-place order as an example of how we would apply those principles and practices to that particular issue, and how we would support children and think about young children and their experience during this pandemic and what's happening now. And then think finally about a regional approach to how we're going to maintain what we've learned. And I will say to all of you that, and I join you in being somebody who attends a lot of trainings myself. And I know for myself that I often leave a training when I'm in there and present, I'm retaining a lot of information. I would say there's a half-life of information. And when I walk out the door, probably half of it goes away. And what I know from polling my own community, and I'm in Alameda County today talking to you, that many people in the early childhood workforce know a lot of principles and ideas and concepts from development, but where they really, really struggle is in how to apply them. So we want to think about going forward the kinds of things we can put into place to really deepen our practice and our understanding of young children, and create a forum for you to talk about putting those into practice and support that. So that's number 3. So here you will see the word cloud. I saw in our chat box, excuse me, already somebody who said, oh, I'd love to see the word cloud. Well, here it is. This is what is reproduced on cards and on bags. And as Susan said, it was very much a combination of the principles that you'll see of early childhood mental health and those that were particularly important to our Northern Learning Collaborative. And I think it looks really quite pretty, but you can also see that it represents, I think, the values of a workforce working with young kids and families, probably all children and families, but very much with relationship-based being very, very, very in the center. And we'll be talking a little more about that as we go. So I want to start with a review of principles, and I want to start with what it means to be developmentally informed. And what I've tried to create for you visually here is a kind of representation in pictures of what's important about early development. We know that in the first 1,000 days of life, that those are the most critical for brain development, with over 1 million new neural connections being formed every second in those early 1,000 days. We know that the brain is 80% developed by the age of 3 and 90% developed by the age of 5. And what that means to us is that in those early years, we're talking about an enormous amount of plasticity and growth and development of both brain architecture, our immune system development, our stress physiology, and that all of those moment-to-moment encounters, experience, and immersion and things is what really is creating those neural networks and pathways, our responsivity. We're bringing our genetics to a particular kind of environment, and you'll see represented here the kind of early experiences that can help shape a child's lens of experience, the range of emotions, the play, the fantasy, the sensory motor exploration, the tasks and early anxieties of young childhood. All of this falls into that realm of what we're thinking of, the importance of being developmentally informed as somebody who works with young children. We have to be comfortable in this domain of development and really understand all the things that play for young children. That said, we know that development occurs in the context of a supportive relationship. We are wired for sociality from the moment of birth, and the capacities of infants reflect this in terms of all of their sensory systems, and that they really develop in the context of the safety protection of a caregiving system. And that development unfolds in a relational context with babies shaping parents and parents shaping babies. We call that a transactional model of development. And that we as parents grow and adapt with our children as well. It's as much a developmental change for us as it is for young children, but you'll see here visually represented some of the many ways that we support children in their growth, in their motor milestones, and their explorations of the world, the imitation that they do in supporting them, and all of the different experiences that they have. And of course, they are taking in a great deal of from us in terms of what it really means to be in the world. And you can really see a whole variety of experiences based on that child's early experience, how they come to view the world as a supportive place, as a place for exploration, or as a scary place, a place that is not very accepting. All of that occurs in the context of what a child is experiencing in those first couple of years. So now we're going to try playing a video from YouTube. This is a very sweet and delightful encounter between a mother and her baby. And I'm going to play this for you in terms of thinking. I want you to, while you watch this, I want you to be thinking about what we know about this little child's development. What are we seeing here? What do we think her lens of expectation will be in the world in terms of the experiences that she's having with her mother? How do you notice what this mother does in relation to the baby? They're creating a little story for you here, back and forth, reading each other, responding to each other. And I am going to, Bryn, pull out my headphones so that you guys start to play this video. I hope that this works.
It's raining. It's pouring. The old man, he's smart. Stop eating all the raisins. He bumped his head. No, he didn't. He went to bed first. It's raining. It's pouring. The old man, he's snoring. Stop eating the box. Don't even think about it, you little. Want a raisin, Dad?
Nope.
You have to pick him out of the chair. Esme. It's raining. It's pouring. You think I can get a kiss? Kisses?
Okay. Bryn, is that okay? Is that off? And we're on to the next slide? Yeah, I just want to make sure. You guys are with me? Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, great. So, so what you saw there in a very sweet way was what I'm going to call an example of being with. This was a baby and a mother very, very much engaged in what is both complex and simple. At the same time, a very sweet encounter of very close attunement and engagement. You can see this mother being really very naturally skilled at playfully being with her baby, playfully guiding her in many ways. She does a really beautiful job of following the child's lead and interests. You can see them include dad in this when they both look to him. And you can see this really beautiful synchrony and dance going on between a mother and child in a very playful encounter, laughing and mirroring each other's affect in this really lovely way. So in terms of what we think of as being with, we see them, this circle that you see here is taken from the circle of security people, where they have taken attachment theory and put it in a very nice graphic and usable way. And you can see on the top half of the circle, a mother and a child engaged in exploration, a mother being with her child and really experiencing all of those joys and interests and explorations. And on the bottom half of the circle, when the child is more in need of a secure base, a parent who can also be with the difficult times. So when we think of that video that we just watched, what we're seeing is of the top half of the circle, basically a good exploration, fun, a little bit of chewing on the raisin box, and mother being playful and really guiding her child and responding. And you can really see that this child will grow up to have a lens of expectation that is very much formed by a parent who was responsive, who was receptive, who was attuned, and could really read their signals and respond accordingly. And we would imagine, but we don't see it in this video, that this is a mother who may also be able to contain the difficult times and what it means to be with a child who is distressed or frustrated or uncomfortable, or a toddler who's really struggling to understand emotions around anger and frustration and all of the things that come with growing up and being a toddler, all the limits that are set, and how you can be with your child during those limits too. So I like this term, being with. What's essential to developing a secure attachment is the knowledge that my caregiver is emotionally available to be with me, especially during hard times. And we have this up here, I do, because we're going to think about what it means to be with families if we are intervening with them, and hold the difficult times with them in terms of how we are. And we're going to come back to thinking about this concept when we think specifically about COVID-19 and sheltering in place and what might be important to young kids. Okay. So principle number 2, in terms of infant and early childhood mental health, is relationship-based. I think this is really the hallmark of an early childhood mental health approach, is really understanding when we think of babies and their caregivers, the people that they encounter, that idea that there's no such thing as a baby, and really carrying that forward in terms of thinking of how many things occur in a relational context. And that's true for all the work that you do. So thinking back to the poll and where you're all coming from, many of you are online staff, direct line staff. So really this idea that whatever you do, whatever your intervention is or your role with families, what your content knowledge is, what services you have to offer, all of that is being delivered through your relationship with the family. So this is a moment to really push a pause button and think carefully about that relationship, and that you and your relationship are the most important tools in your intervention toolbox. Everything you know is filtered really through that. So how you help inform a family about anything is going to be filtered through the relationship you have with them. Are you a stranger who's seen them for the first time? Are you a provider who sees them regularly? Are you a teacher who really knows the child in the classroom, and a little bit about the parents? What's the context of your relationship? Are you in a position of authority over a family? Are you a helper? Who are you, and how are you going to do what you do? So you will see next in our drawings, and I want to thank Amber. This is a drawing that was created in one of our trainings. I will call this her doodle. But she did these very beautiful drawings, and you will see this idea of a parallel process. So what we're calling as the platinum rule, not the golden rule. Really how we treat people affects how they feel about themselves and how they treat other people. And we are specifically thinking about that with respect to how we treat parents, directly translates into how parents treat their children. So we see very much this parallel process and think very carefully about it in these ways. Do unto others as you would have others do unto others, that parallel process, and really knowing and believing that how you treat the parent will influence how they understand and treat their own baby. So again, how you are is as important as what you do. I think a lot about that right now, the amount of care and compassion, the ability to listen closely to people, to really understand someone else's subjective experience, and to do that through a lens. You convey so much in your nonverbal encounters with people that how you do what you do is really very, very important. So this idea of a relationship-based intervention model for young children is really critical. This slide is replicated from the talk we did on risk and protective factors, but the idea of this fulcrum and a balance, and thinking of yourselves as interveners, as being people who can shift this balance when positive experiences outweigh negative experiences. The child's scale tips towards positive outcomes, in really thinking that relationships are a big part of that, and they can tip this. What you do is really important in this way to the fulcrum, and we really want you to think of yourselves that way as somebody. Your relationship with family can be something that can really tip that scale. And as a very brief example, I said this yesterday, so it's in my mind, but I had lunch recently with a woman that I hadn't seen for many years, who was from Cambodia. And I had not realized during this lunch, we talked about the Khmer Rouge, a very difficult repressive regime in Cambodia, and her family had to leave the country, and she lived for a number of years in a refugee camp. And I was asking her what that was like for her, and the first thing she told me was the story about a man, a Caucasian man, who gave her an apple, and she went into this very lovely story actually about this apple. And I sat there thinking, wow, here is a very difficult, painful, horrible time really in her life. And what she remembers is a moment of benevolence, what we'd call an angel moment, opposed to an angel's in the moment. And here she was able to really take away from this experience, this kindness, this act of kindness and generosity from this man. It really very much stayed with me that a brief encounter or relationship with somebody can really be a very pivotal experience to take away. Okay, principle number 3, reflective practice. Again, very much a hallmark of early childhood mental health, and really thinking about what it means to push the pause button and give a moment to reflection. I like this quote from John Dewey, educator, that he said in 1933, "We learn from experience, but do we? We don't learn from experiences, we learn from reflecting on our experiences." And in the mental health field where I come from, there is a great premium placed on what we think clinical or reflective supervision, where you have a space that is a safe space, and really think about what you do, and to really consider kind of how that works. And I think it's a really important thing for all of us to have. Reflective spaces and reflective practice allows us to increase our self-awareness, including values, our cultural and our interpersonal lens, our state of mind and our feelings. It's really important because every family is different than we are, and we need to really understand who we are as we bring what we have to offer someone else. Because of that, sometimes we don't even understand our own culture until we bump up against something that's quite different. So having a space to really consider that is important, and allows us to really imagine someone else's experience. And again, when you think of that parallel process, you want to really make time to do this, because we really want to support a parent to consider their child's experience. And that's something that the idea of reflective functioning in parenting has been really researched for quite some time, and found to be one of the most important things in healthy outcomes for children is that parents can consider their child's internal world and their child's experience and what that baby might be experiencing. So when you run that tape in your head of the mom and baby that I showed you, you can see that that mother very much is attuned in sync with her baby and really thinking about her own child's experience, what's lovely to them, what's too much, what's not enough, and all that. So this idea of reflective functioning and reflective practice is really, really important. So this notion of attuning and engaging and connecting comes out of a reflective capacity. And then recognizing the complexity of the work, because I don't think I have not run across anything more complex than really much of the work that's done by people working in the early childhood field. And I want to acknowledge and recognize all of you who do that work and are particularly in the homes and are traveling to people who are themselves in complex circumstances and really trying to offer our help. So reflection to me seems really, really vital. And we know that providers who are skilled in the self-awareness and can really develop these strong working relationships with families and find ways to deliver their interventions, again, through that relationship that matches the family's ability to take in and use information or use empathy or really understand their own relationships with their children. So part of this awareness and reflection is there's no such thing as a one-size-fits-all delivery of what we do, and that we need a space where we can really think about who we are, how we are, how do I, why is it that, this is a resistant family and I'm worried about them, and what's a good way to reach them, and we all deserve a space and a good listener with us to really sort some of those things out. Okay. Finally, let's call this holding a reflective stance. We know that, again, this parallel process, that parents are most likely to respond sensitively when they can understand the meaning and intention of their children's signals and see them as separate people. And so when we hold a reflective stance with them and allow them to understand their thoughts and feelings that underlie their own actions, and also make a space to think with them about their children's behavior, then we can really see behaviors shift. So that notion of wandering with parents and waiting, watching, being reflective is really something that is a hallmark of what we do in the early childhood field. Okay. Principle 4, let me pause for a minute and see if there are any questions, because I realize that, again, I can't see any of you. I can just see my little camera. And so if there are questions, please write them in the chat. And Bryn, please let me know if people have comments or thoughts, because I would very much like to respond to you. Okay. So principle number 4, we talked about risk, protective factors, and trauma-informed practices. And what you will see here are just highlights of things that are review for many of you. We now live in a state where our Surgeon General, Nadine Burke-Harris, is very, very much ACEs forward. She herself, in her clinic in San Francisco, used the ACEs and the PEARLs, the child version of the ACEs, but they also added social determinants of health, things like food insecurity, and housing, and discrimination. And the ACEs Aware movement is very much about having the universal approach to screening for ACEs and really understanding the vastness with which many of us have been exposed to one of the ACEs, and what it really means to engage in a trauma-informed practice. And often that means reframing the question, particularly with young children, from a what's wrong with you model, which is what many diagnostic systems kind of look like or pull for, to the question about what happened to you. And I think that's a really good reframe and a good practice for all of us to take away. And we also know that traumas happen in a very kind of sensory modality, and that what we take away from those children and adults are various triggers or what we call multiple moments. That is, a trauma is made up of a series of multiple moments. It could be a smell, it could be something you hear, it could be a feeling that you have, it could be a person that was there, it could be a place that you were. All of the detailed moments and elements that make up a trauma that can become a trigger, so that when we see a child in our classroom who reacts to a noise outside or a tone of voice of a teacher, and if what we don't know is that child witnessed his father being arrested 2 nights ago, and there were sirens and handcuffing and tears, all of those things become moments of anxiety and triggers. And many of you living in the communities that we live in know this from a community perspective. I want to acknowledge that certainly in our Northern California communities, we have had so many wildfires in the past few years, and everybody there is very, very familiar with those particular triggers and multiple moments as it relates to those events. So being trauma informed as a home visitor and infant early child person feels really, really important to embed in our practice. But that is just the one side of that. And our learning community in particular wanted to emphasize resilience, as we all do, because trauma is kind of an inevitable part of human existence, which we are all learning all over again right now. And it also goes hand in hand with resilience. I like this Bruce Perry quote because it fits in with the idea that one of the great strengthening factors for resilience is about healthy relationships, and that we do know that resilience is going to be facilitated by having these secure relationships in a child's life. So those are the agents of change, and that goes very much along with how we kind of think about this. The idea of a two-generation approach as we think about resilience and our own intervention is really making sure we're holding those relationships and the whole family in mind. So if you are on the child side of things, always remembering that children come with parents. I work with a lot of people who do their interventions in the schools, and they have way less access to parents, but they have to hold those parents in their mind always and really be thinking about how we intervene on the side of parents. And for those of you who work primarily with parents, we have to always be holding those children in mind and think about the ways that we can support the whole family. And I think this two-generation idea is really an important one, so that we're all really working to do that. And I want to do an acknowledgement to those of you from First Five who are on the line today. I saw many of you there. You are our great partners in this, and I think do a really excellent job of holding the whole family in your effort to support young children and really keeping that two-generation model in mind. So that's really, really important. I want to also say that resilience, I don't want us to think about resilience as an individual trait or quality. I think sometimes I worry sometimes that we start to think about resilience as something that is kind of constitutional, and that some children are more resilient than others, and that we want to really figure out how it's done and then teach resilience as a skill. And I think there is some truth to some of that, but I think what we need to do instead is feel that resilience and promoting resilience is a community effort, and that children are held in families and families are held in communities. And so we have to really think together about how to support resilience as a whole community. And I've seen some really wonderful examples of this. I think our infant mental health tenets align very nicely with the strengthening families pillars. I know that child welfare really holds the strengthening families pillars, as do others. Parental resilience, social connections, concrete support, knowledge of parenting and child development, social emotional competence of children. So those are all good child abuse prevention and resilience things that align together at early childhood mental health. I have seen in my travels up into the northern counties, north of where I am, some really beautiful examples of community resilience. And I am still thinking about the Hoopa community in Humboldt County. They have community engagement dinners, and I have been really impressed with their capacity to reach out to their entire community and bring people out for a dinner and skill building, really helping people with breathing exercises and a rock wall to climb and feeding people nutritious food and really putting into practice a set of kind of resilient practices and really doing it as a whole community. And they live very much in my mind because I had never seen such a successful effort where they served, I think, 1,000 dinners in the community in that valley, and it was really, really nice. So I think taking a community approach to that is a really good way to do that. Thinking of outreach and timeliness, it's important to reach families. I know all of you have ways to do that, but I think sheltering in place right now, it's been an interesting time to think about how do we reach families, who is connected and who is not connected online. How do we go through the systems of care that children themselves come to? Is it family resource centers, or is it pediatric providers, or is it schools or childcare places? Is it grocery stores? Is it places, developmental play groups or play groups in the community? I think all of those are community ways to provide outreach and support relationships, and in that way support families, and to do it in a timely fashion. Get to people in their time of need. We all encounter, I think, way too much gatekeeping and things that are this is an important factor in thinking about that. So we want people in the community to have access to resources. We've talked through the course of this year about screening and referral as one way to match people in need with resources that we have. And when we look at our care continuum a little later on, in a few minutes, we'll see all the different ways that we've been successful at doing that. Really, the message here is that we're building community by building relationships. I want to acknowledge that you already do that and support you to continue to do that. So with those principles in mind, let's think very much about applying this to our current state. We are living in a moment in, I'd say, human history where we see a lot of changes to our world, and we need to be thinking about how they affect all of us, but I will particularly think about how they're affecting infants and toddlers. How are we going to work to support a kind of a co-regulated, attuned, and a set of responsive relationships when schools are closed and employment is disrupted, and we are asked to have relationships at a distance. I realize that the term social distancing is difficult for me because I think we need to be physically distancing, but emotionally connected. So that distinction for me, I want to make that distinction because we need to figure out how to have relationships at a distance and still make sure that we're staying safe. So what we know is that what's the most important to children in stressful times is that they need secure relationships where they can feel safe, where they can express feelings, where there are adults to help clarify misunderstandings and help them feel safe and secure, and that they have a context in which to do all of that. And we also know in disasters, we know this from previous disasters that we just referenced, like Hurricane Katrina, when it hit that area in Louisiana, that we see an increase in domestic violence. We may see an increase in child abuse. People are at home in ways that they haven't been before. We see increases in substance use. And so all of those things are risk factors to relationships. and to safety. And so we need to be very mindful of that and be thinking about that in terms of how we reach out to our community of parents and families. So let me just reference what's in your materials section. I have had Bryn upload for you a variety of things, and let me just orient you to these, and you can decide which of these things you would like to download for yourself. They are all available online if you don't get them now. You will see a couple of things that say Z2T, that is the Zero to Thrive program that comes out of the University of Michigan, and our colleagues there have made some very nice infographics, and you're seeing this picture now on your screen that comes from one of those infographics, generally about how to be with young kids, and then particular ones about safety and creating routines. You will see a coloring book, Georgie and the Giant Germ. Actually, I'm going to show you that in a moment. And you will see in Spanish and in English, and you will see communicating with young children about worries or a transition. It's something that we've put together, which kind of gives you the words of how you would speak to children, because I think we're doing a lot of talking about ideas. Well, which I really turn this into words, and that's for you. Here is a little bit of repetition. I like repetition, and of our stance, our infant early childhood mental health stance of centrality of relationships applied to COVID-19. I am bringing back the word cloud, which is sitting on my desk, my card in front of me. So again, being developmentally informed, as we think about this, we want to not just give voice to the child's experience, which is very important, and consider that outside of our own experience. But by being developmentally informed, how would we know a child was distressed in this current pandemic situation? What would that look like for a 3-month-old? What would it look like for a 3-year-old? What would it look like for a 5-year-old? And how might I respond to that child according to what is reasonable for a child of that age? So that's what it means to bring our developmental expertise to that question. Being culturally responsive, not just working to understand someone's subjective experience, but I want to acknowledge that this pandemic and COVID-19 reveals, again, a lot about health inequities and who is going to be most impacted or affected by the virus. We are all living in different communities. I am talking to you from a very densely packed urban community where shelter in place and the number of cases may be way greater than what it looks like in your rural communities, where you are living more with more space around you and feeling like sheltering in place feels very different and may not feel as necessary as it does in more urban settings. So that's a big difference in culture, in our ecology and how we live. And also, I want to acknowledge the fact that those most impacted may be people with pre-existing health conditions, elderly people, communities of color, who may be differentially impacted by health access, and also have already embedded, when we think about ACEs, a number of traumas or social determinants that have been biologically affected health outcomes. So I want to really highlight that in terms of our cultural responsivity and making sure we understand that this will affect people in very, very different ways according to their circumstances. We will need to be collaborative. Parents are our partners. They are the experts on their children. And as a community, we need to come together with them, building trust and safety, and understand that's going to be true if we are worried about families for all of the risk factors that I identified before, but we need to really be in a collaborative stance. And how to do that in this kind of format is really a challenge that we need to rise to. Our reflective stance, again, pausing to create a space to think and feel, wonder with, and create meaning, because we need to really understand how young children and families are understanding what's going on right now and how to respond to that. And the idea of trauma-informed and resilience focus. So none of this is new. We're kind of repeating what you already know, but kind of wrapping it around young children at the moment. And in terms of resilience, remembering that young children are just learning the skills of self-regulating, and they do that in a relationship of having a co-regulator, and they need that as they understand what's happening with the current pandemic, and that parents need to be able to regulate themselves in order to co-regulate their child. That is, a child's experience of anything is really seen through the lens of what's happening around them. So their behavior will reflect what's really happening around them. If that's chaotic, it may feel chaotic, and if that's well regulated, it will feel. So I added this New Yorker cartoon. This is actually from years ago. Daddy, can I stop being worried now? To kind of remind us, you can see the dad there with the newspaper and the news on in the background, that children really much like absorbing what's around us. They are going to be seeing their parents or feeling their parent quite worried. They are going to be overhearing things. They are going to be hearing the news in the background. And we want to be really mindful of the fact that having big worries as a little child can be really, really difficult. Here's our concept of being with a kind of nice little Winnie the Pooh visual. Being with is a state of mind, not a technique. This is about being vulnerable enough to hold the other's feelings, including whatever feelings get stirred up in us. So when things are particularly difficult, this is a particularly difficult thing to do because you have to manage not only your child's feelings, but your own feelings. And so that is something that we really have to be really mindful of as well. So here we see, and again, this is on your, you have a copy of these slides in the materials, and this is also taken from one of the Zero to Thrive. You can see handouts. Young children can often not tell us about their worries in words. Instead, we see changes in their behavior. And I want to underscore the idea that for young children, behavior is a form of communication. All behavior has meaning. We want to create those reflective spaces to sit down and think about what is the child trying to tell us, whether it's a stomach ache or whether it's hurling something at your head, or whether it's withdrawing. It's very quickly, we often go to try and correct that behavior without creating space to thinking about it as a communication and thinking about the meaning of that. So you'll see listed here a number of the kinds of behaviors that we might see if children are worried. Fussiness, temper tantrums, clinging, or worries or anxieties about separation or people leaving when they do go out could be quite worrisome. An increase in self-soothing behaviors, thumb sucking, rocking, using transitional objects, or really clinging to the parent, really not being able to self-soothe, but needing that co-regulator. The more aggressive behaviors of hitting or spitting or scratching, things that are just an inability to manage one's own internal state, increase acting up, or the reverse, become quiet or withdrawn, or changing in some of the body-based things, eating, toileting, sleeping patterns that we'd see. So these are all the ways that children tell us that they're distressed. Parents often have some baseline of what feels typical for their child. We have to think about this through the lens of the child's developmental stage and age, and then really take a moment to really think about whether it is an indicator that a child is distressed. And again, the distress may be related to something that they're living with in their household. So that's really something to, again, consider. How are the adults doing in that house? And if the adults are not doing very well, if we have on our metaphor, our weather report, if we're in a family where we're in thunderstorms, that child's behavior will absolutely reflect that, and we should really see that as the child's distress. So here we're going to see a series of ways that people are starting to put this information together that is quick and to the point. This is taken from information that was put out by the CDC and the World Health Organization internationally. And what you'll see here in a nice little kid format are some of the guiding things that we would want to really bring to this, starting with don't be afraid to talk about the virus. It's often the case that when traumas occur, parents really struggle with how to talk to little children about it, and either assume they're too young to really understand or notice, or struggle with the fact that the information is too difficult and they really can't find the words to convey to children about that. So I'm going to give you some examples of how to do that. And you'll also find them in that handout about how to talk to young children. Again, being developmentally appropriate, we've spoken a lot about that. How you might reassure a young child, a 6-month-old, in a very physical way, and you're going to convey that through your voice and your tone and your affect and your body. That's going to be very different than talking to a 4-year-old, where you're going to get down to their level and really have a conversation and make a space to really hear their worries and really listen to them. And so you see that, let them talk about their worries, give them a space to really talk about it, and you will hear revealed all sorts of things about what they might be worried about. It may be nothing to do with the virus, and maybe other things. It may be a secondary effect of I can't go to school, or the grown-ups are upset, or mommy and daddy are fighting, or I can't see my friends, or why won't you let me go to the grocery store? I mean, it could be a whole range of these things, but you want to make a space for children to express them. Again, remembering that relational context of a child feeling listened to and feeling heard is going to be really, really important, and an opportunity for the parent to really address that. Focusing on what you can do to stay safe. I think it's on all of us right now to be good stewards of public health. And I think a lot about just teaching children to wash their hands and how to really do that in a thorough and playful way. The guidelines from public health about washing your hands and how to wash your hands and what 20 seconds of hand washing really is, and really doing that with children over and over and over again so that we develop that as a good habit is a very simple but really critical thing that I think we're all going to need to learn to do. And I work at a hospital where I have to have a hand washing training every year. I have come to love the hand washing training. It is now online, but it is a good reminder to me too of what a thorough hand washing looks like. And I have had a member of my staff with one of her nieces. Her niece made a videotape for us. It's a little 7-year-old girl making a hand washing video, and really a kid talking to kids about what that really looks like. So that's just one example about focusing on what you can do to help keep safe. Helping children understand if they're around people wearing masks, what that really means. Remembering that for young children, for really young children, putting a mask on makes you a different person. And those of you who work with young children and have dealt with things like Halloween and costumes and masks know very much that it can be scary to children. And those of you who have lived with people, men with beards who then shave them, and then the child is really distressed, are reminded of that. So very, very simple things that as adults we assume are understandable to children are also very confusing to children. Sticking to routines. Routines and structure are really important to young children. Routines may be changing now, and we're going to be thinking about that. What can we stick to? I find myself, just as an adult, my own schedule is way off, and I have trouble remembering what day it is, or I've shifted to kind of working at strange hours in the night and day. And so that can really drift in a family, and are people still having breakfast and having dinner and going to bed at the same time? And those kinds of anchors in a day are really important to young children. And then this last one, managing your own anxiety, is just a reminder that children really pick up on this. So here's another format of the same thing, depending on how you take this in. Other good examples of how we support understanding and what that really means, explaining why things are different. Again, offering opportunities for expression, and co-regulating yourself, and all of these things that you can do, building new routines. Physical distancing is not emotional distancing, and just being alert to emotional and behavioral regulation and what that would look like. Here are the two coloring books that I have. I've put one of these, Georgie and the Giant Germ, is in the materials section. That comes from the Michigan people. It's a little shorter than Trinka and Sam. It also, both of these are available in Spanish. The Piplo Productions link is beneath Trinka and Sam. Trinka and Sam is a series that's been done. There is one for a whole variety of disasters. There's one for a hurricane, there's one for fires. It is a mouse family, and it is very thorough and goes through all of the things that we've really talked about today in a storybook and a coloring book format that is free at Piplo Productions to download and copy. I know we've taken some of the fire ones up to our northern communities, and Georgie and the Giant Germ is shorter, also a coloring book, but I urge you to download these and take a look at them. They are really excellent examples of really people who know young children writing very much in a way that children will understand. And it creates an opportunity for parents themselves to have the language to talk to their children about that. And I think that's something that's really helpful. What you see here is actually a family stress screener. This has been developed by a woman at Case Western Reserve in Ohio, but we have actually taken it, and you are seeing the version that I am trying to get out in my own program, because I do believe that we owe it to our families to really get some sense that it's not just anecdotal and that reaches a lot of people, and that we can aggregate and talk about as to how people are being affected by this crisis. And so you will see here a whole variety of things on a scale format, whether people are affected in terms of food or housing or childcare, tension between family members, physical concerns, and social connection for child's education, and really even understanding about coronavirus and keeping up with that. I live in a community with many, many immigrant families and people from many cultures, and I worry that what people understand about this and how they understand it is not always equally. If you're interested in something like this as a screen, please get in touch with me, and I'll put something like this into your hands for your own community and help you think about how you might like to use it. So again, back to our resilience, that's how we would think about applying all the things that we already know to promoting resilience in our community. And I've added here the First Five Association web link because I think they've done a really nice job of also putting together resources and remembering, again, if nothing else, that relationships are the safety net for families. So I'm going to start to wrap up by thinking about ending this year. We've thought about early childhood mental health in many ways. We reviewed it today. We've applied it to a situation at hand for you to really think about. And I want to come back to thinking about how we're going to maintain our effort, because learning something and applying it is a continuing effort, not a one-on effort, and we want to be there for you. So what you'll see here is what we're calling Continuum and promotion to treatment, and you will see, at least for our northern counties, many of those things represented in terms of where you are on this care continuum. And we have a really good set of services here, which we're proud of. And you are all part of this, again, workforce, early childhood workforce. We know that an early childhood workforce can make a really critical difference for young children, that caring for families can be hard, and that providers really need knowledge and support. And so our goal, and I'm going to tell you who we are in a moment, is to help really support you with that knowledge and skills. So those of you who've been with us know this, I am part of a consortium. This is our team. We are part of the UC San Francisco Department of Psychiatry, 3 different programs between Oakland and San Francisco, partnered with the First Five Northwest Association and funded by SAMHSA with a 5-year federal grant to do workforce development in the 10 communities in Northern California. And so we are specifically working to support this workforce, which is why partnering with strategies has been so effective for us, and that we want to make sure there's a strong youth and early childhood workforce that can meet those needs. So how are we going to do this with you? First, we spent a year kind of hammering this point of applying a relationship-based perspective across the care continuum, whether you're on the promotion end or the treatment end, to really be mindful of that relationship. Please use the word cloud as a benchmark for the values and practices that we think are important. Those of you in those blue counties, you will have efforts to receive it from the people that see or from us when we are back in your community, which we will be. I would like to invite you to continue training, remaining in contact with us. You will see a survey at the end of this and a link that we will send out, which I urge you to use reflective questions. And that will include a menu of training options. And please fill that out because we can do a number of those trainings in your community and have many of them planned already in this video format. We will be launching a Facebook page called 0 to 5 Workforce. And if you are on this registration list, you will get it. And when we launch that in the next week or so, please visit that and we will be vetting resources and being in touch with you that way. For those of you who don't have that, I would urge you to implement reflective practice and supervision and be in touch with us again, and we can help support you in doing that. And then make sure that you build and strengthen your screening and referral networks as a collaborative community. So I am racing to my finish line looking at the time, and you will be receiving in the chat box, I think, is that right, Bryn? This link to our post-test, which again, I'm saying please use that as a reflective moment to sit and really think about what have you learned about young children and how would you apply that. And I would say take a moment. You're going to be given a bunch of evaluations right now to kind of fill out, but I would urge those of you who resist evaluations to spend some time with them and think about what did I learn, how did I use this. Ours will ask you very specific kinds of things about things we talked about. But those of us who do training and those of us all of us who try and apply for funding, we really need your feedback. We are partnering with you. You're the experts on what works for you, and your feedback is really, really important to us. So I want to just thank everybody who's online for staying with us for this hour and for coming along in this big experiment of training. And I hope that this has been useful. My email contact is on the first slide, which you will have, and I urge you please to be in touch with me. I make that offer a lot, and I mean it. Our project is able to come to the Northern County communities, and we are able to respond to you in other ways if you have questions to follow up. So thank you all for being online with me. I'm going to turn this back to Bryn and Susan to wrap this up, unless we have some questions. And I see, Bryn, you've put the link in there, so people can actually just click on that link, and you will also, if you've signed up for this and we have your email address, you will get it from us as well. And also, we are raffling off some books for those of you who do complete these surveys. We have some good swag in addition to the bags that have been created. The Piplo Productions books from Chandra Kashyap are part of what we do, and we will be raffling that off for people who complete the surveys. We'd really like to get them all. So thank you all. Susan and Bryn, I'm turning this back to you.
Thank you, thank you, thank you, Barbara. I'll just I will, this is Susan again, and I'm not being seen, as you're aware of through this. I don't have good connection where I am, and there were some concerns that it would go in and out and be disturbing, so I'm just a voice. But I do want to say a few words at the end here just to conclude Barbara's presentation and to conclude our series of the learning community activities. First of all, we just want to extend appreciation to OCAP, the Office for Child Abuse Prevention, because they have been funding strategies and they've been funding the learning communities. And there's going to be a transition as we move forward. Some of you may already be aware of this, but for those who are not aware of the transition, they will be transitioning into the development of these county prevention plans. And that is where they will continue to have networking opportunities and to carry forward an opportunity to promote. I'm talking here, but I'm not sure that this is even being heard. Can people hear me? Can you hear me, Bryn?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, I'm sorry. I didn't want to break off there, but for a moment I was just wondering whether anybody was even hearing what I was saying because the pictures were changing around. That's just part of the technology learning. So anyway, just to reiterate that OCAP is going to move forward with a focus on county prevention plans. That's where they're going to continue their collaboration and networking to prevent child abuse and promote well-being, which is part of their mission and vision and part of Strategy's mission and vision. I just want to say how grateful I am to have had this opportunity to work in the learning communities in the Northern region. It is the true North, and it is a privilege to work in this kind of capacity. And I am so appreciative for the partnership that we've had with Barbara with the early childhood mental health, because for those of you that want to continue building on this, the opportunity exists. Barbara has extended an open invitation. You can continue to move this work forward. And I'm hopeful that the word cloud will be a reminder of our experience together, and it will be something that you will continue to carry forward and think about the importance of our words and the difference that you are making in the communities where you are. Just thank you ever so much. I will always be grateful for having had this opportunity.
Thank you so much, Susan. And we at Strategies are so grateful to have had you as a member of our team. We are so grateful to all of you for participating in Strategies 2.0 trainings and learning communities, and we are so grateful for all of you.
So remember to go when we are able to get back into circulation. Remember to go to those sites, that is our northern region. Those were sites where we have, as I mentioned, had learning communities, either remote sites or hubs, and that's where you can pick up your bag.
And I put those sites back up on the screen for you all so that you can write down the one closest to you, but also these this information will be sent out after the training or convening.
Thank you and wish you the very best. If we can get through COVID-19 together, we can probably get through most anything.
That we can. Thank you all, and thank you, Susan and Barbara, for all of your amazing work this year and all of the amazing work you've done for this region.
And thank you, Bryn and Madison, because without the technology whizzes and experts out there, we wouldn't have these opportunities. So thank you, thank you.
All right, everyone, have a great afternoon. We appreciate you spending your time with us. And if you have any questions, you can send an email to me or anyone on the team. Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
Bye.